Welcome to the rest of season top 150 show. Today, we're going to cover all the biggest changes we've made to our rest of season top 150 rankings. Be sure to stay tuned to the end as we'll give 6 moves to make to help your team this week. Big stories this week, guys, is the potential return of a lot of guys off of IR. No, I'm not talking about Jeff Wilson, which maybe we should talk about, but people are much more interested in Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor. This plays into so many different things. You know, if Cooper Kupp is healthy, how does it affect Nacua? How does it affect Kyren Williams? How does it affect Matthew Stafford, Tutu? These guys have all been very, very good fantasy players so far this season. The latest report on Cooper Kupp is that he is quote unquote pushing to play this week against the Eagles. They don't know if he's going to, but he's pushing to play this week against the Eagles. Now, if he can't, the good news is that sounds like this was not nearly as serious as once feared, and he'll probably be back if he doesn't play this week by week 6 or week 7. Mark, how have we been thinking about Rams stuff in the rest of season top 150 now that we know Cooper Kupp is at least close?
There's a lot to digest here, so I'll just kind of go one by one here. I think with Cooper Kupp at the top, if he's healthy against the Eagles, and playing, I think you kind of have to slot him into the low end wide receiver 1 conversation immediately. Again, this is kind of a record setting fantasy wide receiver thrust right back into, I would guess, a similar role, with Matthew Stafford at quarterback. Stafford's been balling thus far, so you have to feel confident just kind of in the overall state of the Rams that Kupp can slide back in and be successful. I think, looking at the rest of the team, Puka Nacua is clearly, I think, the wide receiver probably to be most affected by this. He currently leads the NFL with 52 targets. And when you look at the guys behind him, it's all, first and second round wide receivers for the most part. So Puka's just been an absolute smash. I do think Puka will still be a wide receiver 2 when, Kupp returns. And I think initially too, Kupp, there's probably a chance he plays, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the routes. He's probably not going to be a full-time player. I would imagine they ease him in a little bit, but I do think Puka is still a wide receiver 2. And then, Tutu Atwell, I think. Yeah.
Let me stop you. Let me stop you there real quick, because the argument, Mark, is that, well, Puka and Cooper Kupp play the same position. And so once Kupp comes back, Puka is totally dead. I just want to be clear. I don't think I agree with that. I think Puka can actually play outside. I would note that this year, Puka has played 181 snaps outside, 82 in the slot. And this past week, in week 4, Puka was out wide 59 snaps in the slot for 19. In other words, they can put Cooper Kupp back in his slot role and keep Puka on the outside. Now, will Puka be getting 10, 15, 20 targets in a game with Cooper Kupp back? Probably not. Am I 100% convinced Cooper Kupp can sustain health for the rest of the season? No, I am not either. So I didn't mean to cut you off, Mark, but I just wanted to be clear that I don't think people should be full-blown panic on Puka. And just to service the audio listener here, if you're watching this on YouTube, you see our rankings for all the Rams guys. We still have Puka Nacua 31st overall, even with the pending return of Cooper Kupp. So yeah, I just want to put that out there, Mark. But yeah, any thoughts on that? And then you can keep going.
Well, yeah, thankfully, I think there's enough to go around because the Rams right now are 6th in the NFL in pass rate over expectation. So they're throwing the ball a lot. Again, Stafford's been playing super well. It's a little fragile. We saw him bang up his hip a little bit this past week. So it obviously kind of rides on him continuing to be healthy to support this offense. But I do think that, Kupp, Nacua, and then Kyren Williams, who we've seen emerge as kind of a low-end RB1. I think, we can Leone in our Slack was saying, wow, I'm surprised the Rams have a 23-point team total against the Eagles. I think this offense is going to score a lot, and there's enough to go around. It should be relatively concentrated. So I think with Kupp, Puka, and Kyren, those guys are all, weekly starters as long as Stafford's healthy.
Yeah, I've heard some people, Jack, say, oh, we need to be selling Kyren Williams. This workload is ridiculous. He's going to get hurt. He's not going to be as efficient. I don't know, man. This role is so good. And we have seen this before with Sean McVay, where he latches onto a running back and just rides this guy into the ground. That's what he's doing with Kyren Williams right now. I mean, I don't like to say, oh, guys are definitely get hurt. Obviously, the more you touch the football, the more likely you are to get hurt. But that would not be a reason for me to be selling Kyren. We still have Kyren 36 overall. I could make a case for him to be even higher too, given the role. I don't know, Jack, how would you be handling Kyren right now if you had him?
Yeah, I think there's a little concern about if the Rams add someone or start to move away from him, because he hasn't been particularly efficient so far with 3.8 yards per carry, 4.6 yards per target. But I think we have like multiple years of evidence at this point that Sean McVay just loves Kyren Williams. So at this point, I'm not super worried about that despite the inefficiency. But I think that the fact that he is so inefficient so far at least keeps the possibility open that he doesn't sustain this workload the entire season. But I think the most likely outcome is that the Rams just ride Kyren until the wheels fall off, basically.
Agreed. I mean, I've seen people like, oh, they're going to trade for Jonathan Taylor. That would, I mean, shock me. We'll get to Jonathan Taylor in a second here, but there's just absolutely no reason for the Rams to trade for Jonathan Taylor. And by the way, I mean, we had on good information last year prior to week one, before the 2022 season, prior to week one, the Rams actually wanted to feature Kyren Williams, but he got hurt on the opening kickoff, opening night, never really materialized for him. Last thing on the Rams is the Tutu stuff, because Tutu's been a godsend. I have a bunch of 20th round Tutu in best ball, and it's been great. I'm worried that if/when Kupp comes back, Tutu is actually going to be squeezed because they love giving Van Jefferson routes. And my God, Van Jefferson's like, I don't know, man. I don't think they should play Van Jefferson at all. I think the 3 wide receiver set should be Kupp, Nacua, and Tutu, but I'm not convinced that Sean McVay is actually going to take Van Jefferson off the field. So any Tutu thoughts here, Mark?
I think he'll probably play over Van Jefferson once Cooper Kupp comes back. Just again, I mean, he was a second round pick for the Rams. It's not like they do like Van Jefferson. He's been on the team for several years now, and certainly a reliable asset for them. But I think we've seen an emergence from Tutu that puts him above Van Jefferson in the pecking order. So, I think he's probably fourth in line on the team in targets, which is never great, for fantasy. But again, they are throwing the ball a ton. I think, maybe he's in the wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 range. And again, You mentioned, like, I don't know how secure we feel about Cooper Kupp staying healthy the whole season. So I think he's probably more of a bench stash and see how it plays out. But I'm optimistic that he'll play over Van Jefferson.
You said Van Jefferson's been a reliable asset. He's been reliably sucking for the Rams. All right, let's be clear on Van Jefferson. Okay. The other big story is that Jonathan Taylor, we're recording this Wednesday around 1 p.m. Eastern. Jonathan Taylor, from what I can tell, sounds like he's going to be at practice today, which is like stunning to me. Like, he's just going to walk back into practice like nothing happened. I don't know that I buy this. Like, oh, nothing. I told the owner to F off, and I didn't show up to work. And then, but now I'm just going to walk back into work. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know that it's actually going to go down like that. I feel like there has to be some concessions on some side, whether it's financial or whatever. So I'm keeping a close eye on this. Obviously, I don't think Jonathan Taylor has any leverage. We have installed Jonathan Taylor back in at 34th overall here. Jack, I think we're all guessing at this point, but how do you think the JT situation plays out? And if you have Zach Moss, you have Jonathan Taylor, how are you handling that?
Yeah, I definitely agree that we're all guessing, and it's not like we have some, amazing read on what's going to happen with this Jonathan Taylor saga. There was a report a week or two ago that his stance hasn't really changed, and he still wants out of Indianapolis. So it is pretty interesting to see him just presumably walk into practice today. They have 3 weeks to activate him. He's still not on the active roster, so we're not going to get any like official media stuff from Jonathan Taylor until that happens. But I think as long as Jonathan Taylor is on the Colts, I'm not that optimistic about him just because of the severed ties, the severed relationship he seems to have with the team. I think that if he gets in any way dinged up, he'll probably just rest and try to get to 100% with an eye on a long-term deal next off season. And I don't even know if they're going to give him like a full Jonathan Taylor workload if they know that he doesn't really want to be there and he's not in the team's like long-term plans.
Yeah, I had a fade on Jonathan Taylor even before all this contract stuff popped up. Like, I wasn't taking him where he was going in round 2. And that was when I assumed he was going to play 17 games. My concern, of course, is that with Anthony Richardson there, you're going to lose a lot of the goal line work, which Jonathan Taylor, quite frankly, has been reliant on because he's not that good in the pass game. We did see Zach Moss get 4 carries from inside the 5-yard line, which I think is encouraging for JT stuff, assuming he's back on the team. This past week didn't convert any of them. But yeah, I'm not like falling all over myself on the JT stuff. I would definitely still be holding Zach Moss too. Again, not a lot of leverage for JT, but he needs to play, I believe, 6 games or something like that. I mean, he could do some crazy stuff, man. I mean, he could play 6 games and walk off the field. I mean, who knows what JT can do at this point. Any other comments on Indy you want to make, Mark, before we move on?
Well, I certainly am a little excited about Jonathan Taylor just because Zach Moss has been a top 15 running back. And certainly when you just look at talent profile and the setup of this offense and how they were featuring Zach Moss, like if you slot Jonathan Taylor into that role, I do think he would immediately be an RB1. There's certainly a lot of concern around, the whole situation. So I understand that. But in terms of the upside here, it's certainly, I think it's a gamble at this point. I'm willing to take, but maybe I'm a fool there believing that this situation will work itself out.
Yeah, obviously we have a lot of information to gather here on the JT situation. Speaking of guys coming back, I mentioned Jeff Wilson. I want to talk about Miami for a second here. Jeff Wilson's return, I think, is interesting, or probable return. We don't know he's for sure coming back. I think he'll be back relatively soon. But I do think that Wilson is like more in the Raheem Mostert role, and Devon Achane has his own role now. And I think where we have that reflected in the rest of the season top 150, where we have Achane 49th overall, Raheem Mostert down at 68 overall. And then I also want to get to the Waddle stuff because it has not been great for Waddle. Mark, why don't you start with the running back situation in Miami?
I'm actually not even convinced that Jeff Wilson's really going to get many touches here. I do think if he did, it would come mostly from Mostert. But, this past week we saw Devon Achane take the lead in terms of snaps and touches in that backfield against the Bills. They were in a trailing game script, so it still remains to be seen if Mostert will be the 1A and when they're leading. And they're likely to lead against the Giants this upcoming week, so we'll probably get an answer there. But I certainly, I think both Mostert and Achane are much more talented than Jeff Wilson, and I think should be, the top 2 there. So I'm really not too concerned, and would more so be in the camp of being concerned about Raheem Mostert. But again, he was my sell high on this show last week. So he's one I've been more worried about here for a couple weeks.
Jaylen Waddle, Jack, I mean, it has not been great. He missed a game due to the concussion. Tyreek has hogged targets in the game this past week. Waddle was unable to really separate from a target perspective, even when Tyreek was not getting targets. Now, we expect Jaylen Waddle to be very, very efficient, right? He doesn't need 10 targets in a game to be a very good player. We have dropped him down in the rest of the season top 150, though, to 38th overall. Jack, if you had Jaylen Waddle, what would you be doing now? And I've heard some people call Jaylen Waddle a buy low, which I thought was interesting too. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm honestly not overly worried about Waddle. The efficiency is still there. He's actually more efficient on a per target basis than last year, but he's only at a 14.5% target share. He was right under 20% last year, so the volume is the problem. But I think at this point we have a pretty big sample size of Jaylen Waddle earning targets. Like we saw all of last year, him next to Tyreek Hill, and he was getting 19-20% of targets. So I'm not really panicking to a month stretch where he has a 14.5% target share with largely maybe not the same personnel, but like going from Gesicki to Durham Smythe and Trent Sherfield to Braxton Berrios isn't like make or break for Jaylen Waddle. So I'm fine leaning into the bigger sample with what we saw last year, because Tyreek's target share is pretty similar too. It's not like he's all of a sudden getting 35% of targets. So I think Waddle is going to rebound.
Yeah, I mean, Waddle has no touchdowns. Waddle has not caught more than 4 balls in a game. He hasn't topped 86 yards in a game this year. I think it's an interesting spot to buy low on Waddle, still a 24-year-old ascending wide receiver, an awesome offense. Wanted to go to Lions stuff here, Mark. First, we have Jameson Williams returning off of suspension. Talked a bunch about that with Silva and with Sam on the last 2 shows. We also made the move to bring David Montgomery up above Jahmyr Gibbs. And maybe I'm an outlier. I don't think that one is particularly close. I strongly prefer David Montgomery. I mean, do you guys not like touchdowns? Is that why we have Jahmyr Gibbs so close to David Montgomery? Because I like touchdowns, and I don't think it's a fluke at all that Jamal Williams scored 17 last year. David Montgomery has 5 rushing touchdowns in 3 games this year. Yeah, there's some luck in where guys get pushed out, but when this team is inside the 5-yard line, they don't run tush push. They don't throw very much. In fact, they barely throw. They're the most run-heavy team in the entire NFL in the red zone. And so David Montgomery is to me, he's the feature back and Gibbs is the satellite back. And why would they change that? They're winning. I mean, they're playing good offense and they're winning. So, yeah, I know you think probably Montgomery and Gibbs are closer. Mark, any thoughts on that? And then I did want to get your guys' take on the Jameson stuff.
In terms of the backfield, I mean, it's like I understand the Gibbs take, like not being super excited about him, but they did spend the 12th overall pick on him. So I think if he was, late first, like early second round pick, then we wouldn't be as eager to crown him over David Montgomery. But when the team signals that, it's hard to ignore. I certainly think, the play on the field is probably more impactful. And like you said, David Montgomery is getting all the looks inside the 10 when both are active. Gibbs did get some in the week. David Montgomery is out, but certainly when both are healthy, it feels like Demont is certainly ahead there. In terms of Jameson Williams, he's someone I do want to believe in as well, but I'm also a little skeptical. Last season, he was coming back from an ACL tear, but he was really eased in. I mean, his highest snaps played in a game was 25% last year, which is just not going to get it done. Had one catch all season. So while I want to believe in him there, just with the talent profile and how he dominated at Alabama and, first round wide receiver, again, draft capital there. And the Lions do need an explosive playmaker to kind of take the lid off the defense. So he kind of fits the bill quite well in this offense, but I'm worried that the role is going to be underwhelming. And at this point, I think it's interesting that, he could be more of a sell high if people are super excited about him getting his suspension reduced and he's back early. And, people kind of didn't spend the pick that they would have needed to if, we knew he was only going to miss 4 games. So I would lean kind of sell high on Jameson Williams at this point, but the upside is certainly tantalizing.
A couple things. First on Jameson Williams, he played 78 offensive snaps last year and caught 1 ball, right? That's scary. You played 78 snaps, which is like more than a full game. You caught 1 ball. However, he was coming off the ACL, and man, they need him this year. Everything is so close to the line of scrimmage. Gibbs' targets are close to the line of scrimmage. Amon-Ra's targets are close to the line of scrimmage. Laporta's targets are close to the line of scrimmage. I mean, Jameson Williams is such a good fit. He was unbelievable at Alabama in his final year there. I mean, it's the kind of player that I want to make bets on, but I don't know that I'm necessarily like trading for him. I've been stashing him in a couple spots for sure. On the Montgomery Gibbs stuff, I mean, maybe I'm biased, man. I just thought that like all my best ball teams are ones that started with Dave Montgomery as my first running back selected. And like Dave Montgomery in round 7 and like, Brian Robinson or James Cook or something like that as my RB2. I mean, to me, that was like the best way to build when I could make it work. And so I don't know. I'm biased towards Dave Montgomery, but is what it is. Jack, any Lions comments here before we move on?
Yeah, I agree with you guys on Jameson Williams, where I think on JMO, the median outcome is not very high, given, how much he played last year and 1 catch or target or whatever on 78 snaps. But I do think that his range of outcomes is like as wide as basically anyone. And there is like a path to him being like a top 24 receiver over the second half of the season. So I think if you've held Jameson this long, I probably would not be selling him. And I think that they are going to ease him in since it wasn't just the suspension for gambling. He also had a hamstring injury. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a decent chance he doesn't play all that much this week. And then he could be on waivers again in 2 weeks. And if we start to see that snap share is ramping up, I'd be pretty interested in adding him.
I think that's a good point because, yeah, he missed a lot of camp with the hamstring issue. And then this whole month, he wasn't even allowed to talk to the team. He wasn't allowed to talk to the coaches, wasn't allowed to be in the facility. So I totally agree. He's going to be eased in slowly here. Would not want to start Jameson Williams out of the gate. For those who don't know, Mark is a Bengals laundry bro.
I'm not.
He eats chili. He's from Cincinnati. All this stuff. We need Mark's laundry bro take on what you would be doing if you're holding the bag right now on Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, because there's some heavy bags because those guys were very, very expensive in drafts. If you have Chase, Higgins, Burrow, Mark, how are you handling it right now?
Well, my friends are gonna be pissed that you call me a Bengals fan because I'm not a Bengals fan despite being from Cincinnati. I won't get into the reasons, but anyway, yeah. In terms of the Bengals and fantasy, I'm really worried here, and I don't know if I'm overreacting to the bad game against Tennessee, but I just think like I don't know, when I look at Joe Burrow and how this offense has been successful over the years and why Joe Burrow is a good quarterback, it's because he can maneuver within the pocket, extend plays, and hit deep shots down the field. And at this point, with his health and his calf, like, I just don't really envision that happening anytime soon. I would be in favor of them sitting him down for a few weeks, potentially through the bye, and hopefully, like, towards the end of the season stretch, I would be more optimistic that the Bengals offense is going to come around. But if they keep playing him through this, I'm worried that it's just going to be mediocre results, week in and week out. And I do like the talent on this offense is obviously, very exciting. And like Jamar Chase I still feel confident in Chase just because the way he is operating in this offense right now is, they're getting him the ball and letting him eat with yards after the catch. But in terms of T. Higgins, like, his play style is more contested catches deep down the field, again, with Burrow extending plays and pushing it down the field. He's not going to, be a great yards after catch guy and volume receiver. So I'm definitely worried. Obviously Joe Burrow is last in the NFL in yards per attempt. Like, I just think the warning signs are there, and I don't know when it's going to get better. So unless someone can tell me, like, a plan on, Burrow playing through this and him being healthy, coming out healthy at some point, I just don't want to believe in Joe Burrow when he's, playing at like 75%. I just think it's a bad situation right now.
I mean, in fairness to Burrow, outside of Chase, they don't really have, like, truly explosive players. Like you mentioned, T. Higgins more of a contested catch guy. Joe Mixon has not been explosive in a long time. Tyler Boyd is your normal slot guy. And, like, yeah, it's hard. I think if you're going to tell me that you think Joe Burrow is going to play like this for the whole season, I just can't see it. The calf is going to get healthier. He's going to find a way to play better through this calf thing. He's going to get some different kind of rehab. He's going to have a bye week coming up, I believe, in week 7. Like, I don't think that it's going to be like this forever on Joe Burrow. We still have Jamar Chase 9th overall. We did make a bigger doc on T. Higgins, which I agree with, given the rib injury and the way he wins, down to 47th overall. So yeah, I don't think I'd be selling low on Jamar Chase. If someone wanted to give me something for T. Higgins right now, I would listen, but it's really hard to envision anyone giving up anything close to value for T. Higgins, given the injury and the way they've played this year. I did try to add Tyler Boyd in a couple spots this week off of waivers. Jack, last question before we get into the listener questions is on the Giants. I mean, this was an epic meltdown in an island game. I don't think it's as bad as it seems, but my God, Daniel Jones took 10 sacks against the Seahawks, who don't even have a good pass rush. It was absolutely hideous. We still have a couple guys here in the back end. Wandale, 146 overall. Matt Breida, 149 overall. The Saquon bags are starting to feel a bit heavy. The Waller bags are feeling really, really heavy. We chopped Waller down 30 spots in the rankings this week. Jack, if you're holding Darren Waller, how would you be handling stuff on the Giants?
Yeah, I mean, I after the game he had on Monday night, I don't really think anyone's going to be trading for Darren Waller. So I think you kind of are just forced into holding him. He still has a 17% target share on the season, and before last week it was in the 20s. So I still think that he's going to get volume. He probably isn't going to be the guy that the Giants beat writers were hyping him up to be during the preseason, but tight end is such a wasteland. He's still the primary read. So I think, and no one's going to trade for him. Like, you're not going to get a whole bunch for Darren Waller right now. I think you're just kind of forced into holding. We do have Wandale Robinson at 146. I think he's a pretty interesting ad. He's probably on waivers in a lot of leagues. But Darius Slayton remained the primary guy in terms of routes. He had 44 routes, but Wandale Robinson was second with 32 routes. And we have a lot of evidence that he's a super high targets per route run guy. It looks like he's overtaking Paris Campbell as the primary slot. He had a 17.5% target share. So I think he's a pretty good ad right now. And besides, it's a gross offense, or at least it has been so far. But besides Waller and Barkley, I do think Wandale is worth adding.
I mean, Wandale, I think, is going to give you a lot of like 5 for 40 lines and like 5 for 35 and 6 for 42 and stuff like that. Where he's working is like JSN, Rondale Moore range, which is hard to have explosive plays on. But I agree that I think in full PPR, especially, if you need 5-6 catches, Wandale at least has a chance to give that to you. The tight end position is just such a mess. We're going to get to some of these tight end questions in the listener question, but Darren Waller is still like 4 for 50 and a touchdown will be one of the best tight end weeks of the week, right? And like I think that's very well in the range of outcomes for Waller. So I would not be panic dropping Waller. If someone wanted to give me wanted to give Waller away for free, I would for something somebody on my bench, I would be at least listening to that. All right. Let's get to some of your questions here. Appreciate everyone who sent them in via Twitter. Let's go to the FF Gator. He says, should I be moving on from Dallas Goedert for someone like Jake Ferguson? It seems as if Goddard is the forgotten man in the Eagles offense so far. The way Goddard's being used has been so weird to me. It's been so short. He's getting like screen passes, which normally is fine, but he's not getting any like seam stuff. I don't really see a big difference in the offense this year. Why that would be. Mark, do you have a Goddard take for the people now? And would you be dropping Goddard for Jake Ferguson? By the way, Jake Ferguson has had quietly a really nice role.
I don't think I would be dropping Goddard. I do like adding Ferguson if there's room on your bench to roster both, but Goddard does lead all tight ends in routes. So he's out there a ton. And, certainly like the Eagles offense is going to run through AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. Like no matter how talented Goddard is, the talent outside that they have is going to reign supreme there. So I do think Goddard, there was some coach speak from Nick Sirianni saying that he does like want Goddard to still be involved in the offense, and they're gonna work to get him more involved. But when you kind of take into account how much they run in the red zone with the tush push with Jalen Hurts, like we need touchdowns from our tight ends, plain and simple, to really reach their ceiling in fantasy. And at this point, he might be, I don't know, 4th on the list in this offense, maybe 5th when it comes to potential touchdowns. So that's my fear there. I'm not dropping Goddard though, because he is out there a ton. We know he's talented. This is a great offense. If Devonta Smith or AJ Brown went down, I think he would easily be like a top 3 tight end. So I think it's going to get better.
Yeah. I mean, unlike a lot of teams, like the Commanders and stuff like that, they throw to so many different guys. The Eagles are still really only throwing to 3 guys. I mean, Zacchaeus and Quez Watkins are not getting a ton of looks. Running backs are not getting a ton of looks either. So I'm still pretty optimistic on Goddard. But yeah, I don't want to discount the role that Jake Ferguson has. I'd rather have Goddard than Ferguson, but Ferguson's role is awesome. And they have not even had a normal game yet, have the Cowboys. I'll get more into that in a second here. Jack Jerry asked, what should we do with Breece Hall? I have him on a team where I basically need to start him every week, but he's unreliable. Would you roll with Breece and pray for the best, or move on from him? So hopefully you guys saw the the quote from Robert Saleh today. Saleh said, when asked about Breece Hall, there is no pitch count with him anymore. And that sends the fantasy Twitter community to a full 3.9 inches, because they now believe, because of that quote, Breece Hall is suddenly going to start getting 20 and 25 touches per game. I don't see it that way. Obviously, it's encouraging for Robert Saleh to come out and say that. I don't necessarily see it that way, but to answer the question here, Jack, Jerry has Breece Hall. Can he start him every week, or would you try to trade him off of these quotes here today?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be holding him. He plays the Broncos this week. The Saleh quotes are really encouraging. So far, the past couple of weeks, Breece Hall is outsnapping Dalvin Cook like 2-1. There's definitely room for that to increase, especially given that Dalvin's averaging 2.5 yards per carry on the year. Michael Carter is still playing long down and distance stuff. Breece Hall obviously excelled in that as a rookie. So there's a lot of room for this workload to expand. And I think it will. I don't think he's going to go out there suddenly and get like the Christian McCaffrey, Kyren Williams workload. But I do think that by the end of the season, he could be getting a lot of touches. And the quotes today are a step in the right direction. My primary question with Breece Hall isn't even really about the workload. It's about Zach Wilson and whether he can keep this offense, be confident enough so that Breece Hall has scoring opportunities. But I think things are looking up for Breece workload wise, and it's an ideal matchup this week. The quotes from Saleh are a great sign. So I would be holding Breece.
Yeah. Maybe this will look bad. We have a big sample of Zach Wilson belonging in Safeway, and people are going to extrapolate one comeback against the Chiefs at home and say that he can play now. I don't think so, man. I don't think so. And I also think that, unless they remove Michael Carter from pass downs, Breece Hall's ceiling is going to be capped because it's going to take some heart to fully bench Dalvin Cook, And I'm not sure the Jets have the heart to do so. They massively overpaid Dalvin Cook to come there. Now they realize that he sucks. It's going to take some heart to just sit him down and be like, well, now you're going to get 2 or 3 carries a game. I don't see that happening either. And so if Michael Carter's not going to go away and Dalvin's not going to go away and Zach Wilson's going to go back into a pumpkin, still have my concerns on Breece Hall. Now for this week, the Broncos defense is looking historically bad. I would probably try to wait until after this week to move him, but I still feel like Breece Hall is not the guy for this season. But, that could look really bad. If they get a quarterback, I think Breece is going to smash, if they get a real quarterback. I'm not buying the Zach Wilson Chiefs game, though. All right. Let's go to Sully. Says he's thinking about offering Kyren Williams for Jaylen Waddle. I'm aiming too low. I have 2 other starting running backs he's trying to replace Mike Williams. Interesting. I think you already mentioned Jaylen Waddle as a possible buy low. Mark, what do you think about Kyren buy low? You're giving up a lot. I think we all agree Kyren is an awesome asset.
For sure. Kyren's been amazing. Hard to say anything negative about his role and how he's performed. This is interesting. I do think Waddle, like you could maybe try and get someone a little better, like a Brandon Ayuk or Devontae Smith, since AJ Brown's been crushing there. I think are other potential options kind of around where Kyren is in our rankings. I do think like if you want to tell yourself that Cooper Kupp comes back and takes a bunch of targets that have been going to Kyren and maybe the workload gets to him. Like I could see making that trade. That's kind of a coin flip for me. I'd probably keep Kyren, but if you have other options like at running back, I could see making that deal for Waddle. I do lean, Waddle being a buy low right now.
Yeah, I think Waddle's a buy low, but the running back position, it's so hard to get guys like Kyren who have this kind of usage. I would probably be asking for Waddle plus on the Kyren side. B. Newell had a question. He says he needs a tight end bad. He had Freiermuth, and he has running back depth. Should he trade David Montgomery for Darren Waller or Kenneth Walker for Hawkinson? Just zooming out here, guys. Like, I personally think if you have dust at tight end, you're streaming, it's better than giving up awesome assets like David Montgomery and Kenneth Walker. Like, it's tight end, man. Most chances are you're going to go into your game in a week, and your tight end you're playing against is not going to do anything. That's just the most likely scenario. So, I'd much rather have Montgomery or Walker than Waller or Hawkinson. I understand you need a tight end. I would just be trying to stream it in, see what's on the waiver wire, just try to stream it in or see if you can give up something way, way less. Jason says, I was offered Anthony Richardson and David Montgomery for Trevor Lawrence and Kyren Williams. Any thoughts there? This is quarterback, running back trade here, Jack. I personally think that Anthony Richardson is a clear step ahead of Trevor Lawrence. And I also love David Montgomery too. But yeah, what do you think about this one, Jack? AR-15 and Montgomery for T-Law and Kyren Williams.
Yeah, I think I lean toward the Anthony Richardson side, mostly because I don't think Kyren is obviously better than Montgomery, but I don't think it's that big of a gap. But I do think that Anthony Richardson is a pretty significant upgrade over Lawrence, so I would lean that direction.
Rafferty says, what's a good return on trading Devon Achane, Mark? Well, Mark doesn't want to trade Devon Achane. Mark's been on Devon Achane since preseason and secretly sleeps next to pictures of Devon Achane, so he's probably the wrong guy to ask here. But Mark, what do you think is good return on trading Devon Achane?
I'd probably be asking for a top 15 wide receiver in return. It's certainly an easy sell right now after he has 6 touchdowns in 2 games. So I would be aiming high. Again, I would love to have Achane on my roster the rest of the season. So unless I'm getting like a locked in wide receiver that I know is a huge upgrade on the rest of the options on my roster, then I probably wouldn't trade Achane. So yeah, I would shoot for a top 15 wide receiver. And you can check out the rankings to see who qualifies for that.
Yeah. I understand Devon Achane had 2 more touchdowns on Sunday. He still only touched the ball 11 times, and he was out there a ton. So, I don't think that they want to give Devon Achane or can give Devon Achane 15, 18, 19 carries, touches on a consistent basis. I still think that he's going to be the 1B when they're winning games and 1A when they're trailing, So I don't want to get too crazy on the Devon Achane stuff, even though I absolutely love him. And I think it's sometimes hard for me to like get my head around these efficiency guys where, yeah, he's only going to touch the ball 10 times, but he's going to be so outrageously efficient that I need to be higher on him. It's hard for me on those guys. And maybe Achane is one of those guys, but yeah. Good question here from Brad. He says, what can we reasonably expect for Alexander Mattison? Should we be selling as fast as possible? I mean, it's kind of gone as expected for Alexander Mattison. He's been a little bit worse than I thought he would be. But especially with like the fumbles and some of the goal line conversion stuff, I thought he'd be fine there. He's been historically good at the goal line, historically good at not fumbling. And he's like the running back 20. I mean, he's been fine. He's averaging over 4 yards per carry. It's just like getting dragged along by the offense and volume was kind of the thesis of the play. Nothing has really changed on Alexander Mattison. But yeah, if you wanted to sell on him now, I think you can, Jack. I mean, I thought 18-7 in opportunities was Alexander versus Akers last week. I think that's going to be pretty sticky. So yeah, what do you think, Jack, about the Madison stuff right now?
Yeah, Akers did get some of the short yardage and some snaps near the goal line, which is a little bit concerning because if he starts taking over that role, then Madison obviously is kind of drawing dead for touchdowns. But I think it was encouraging to see him actually play pretty well for once and just to see him still keep Akers at in arm's length. So I don't think he's a must sell, but I think I think there's probably a lot of people who see his expected fantasy points or whatever, some of these stats, and think that he's like an amazing trade target right now. So if you can get one of those people, then I think he's a fine guy to trade. But it's not like I'm trying to get him off my roster at all costs or anything.
What Jack is saying is that if you have a spreadsheet virgin in your league who looks at expected fantasy points, Alexander Madison's expected fantasy points on a week-to-week basis is massive because he gets so many targets and not so many targets. He gets targets and goal line work, and he plays a ton. Alex says, is Keenan Allen a sell high? Age model, seemingly gets hurt every year, and Mike Williams is out. Perhaps defense's game plan to stop him. So certainly a disappointing game for Keenan Allen last week there against the Raiders. But man, I mean, Eckler coming back, I think makes a huge difference to Keenan Allen, but this is not a guy I really want to be selling. I don't think, Mark. We still have him 11th overall. Any thoughts on selling high on Keenan Allen?
I get the thesis there that, he's old and does have a injury history, but I mean, you drafted him probably in the 4th round and now I think he's a 1st round talent the rest of the season. So I would lean holding Keenan unless you can get, again, just another like top 6 wide receiver in return, but I'm not sure people are going to be doing that flip at this point. I still think it's wheels up for Keenan, even with Eckler, coming back after the bye.
All right. I want to get to our moves to make. We're each going to give 2. Before I do so, be sure, if you're watching on YouTube, look at this graphic that is covering Jack's face right now. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. In-season content is indeed live. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Podfeed, please hit the subscribe button. It is indeed free. Helps us out a ton. All right. We'll go around the horn here. My moves to make last week were buy Christian Watson, which he got a touchdown, thankfully, for my family, but didn't have a great game, although he only ran a route on about half of the dropbacks. We're expecting to run way more this week. So hopefully good things coming for Christian Watson. And my other move to make last week was sell Brown's pass game, which, considering Deshaun Watson didn't even play, I guess looks good. My first one this week, I think, is a layup, but maybe it's not because I've heard some people getting frustrated. Mine is buy Tony Pollard. We have Tony Pollard 4th. I repeat, 4th overall in the top 150. And I've heard plenty of people who are tilted. Tony Pollard, now that he's the feature back, isn't as efficient. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, Tony Pollard, he hasn't gotten me enough points. Tony Pollard's role is incredible. Dallas has had the weirdest games, man. I mean, they have just scored so many defensive touchdowns. They've got behind in that weird game to Arizona. I haven't seen anything to suggest Tony Pollard is not a complete smash. And if people are at all panicking on Tony Pollard, I would be trying to trade for him. I expect a normal game this week against San Francisco, which obviously is not a good matchup. But after San Francisco, if Dallas can get in some of these normal games, they're going to set up for some higher scoring, more free-flowing games that I think is better for Tony Pollard going forward. So 49ers this week, then Chargers, Rams, Eagles, Giants, Panthers, Commanders, Seahawks, Eagles, Bills, Dolphins, Lions. I mean, come on. These are going to be high scoring, hopefully normal games for Tony Pollard. Got to have Tony Pollard. I got to have him, man. And so, I'd be trying to trade for Tony Pollard right now. For my first move, Jack, I give you the floor for your first move of the day.
Yeah, well, my first move last week was to sell Romeo Doubs, and then he went off. So that we'll try to get back on track here. With one that might seem a little weird, I'm gonna do sell James Cook. He's the PPR RB12 right now, so he's been putting up numbers. He has 5.3 yards per carry, so he's been good, which we expected him to be from a rushing efficiency perspective. And he did score his first touchdown on a goal line carry. But Josh Norris had some really good context about how Cook scored his touchdown. Basically, Latavius Murray had a pretty big run to get him down there. They brought Cook back on the field, and then they ran no huddle 2 or 3 plays in a row. And so James Cook just happened to still be out there while they were trying to get the Dolphins defense off guard with some tempo. And that just happened to get him a 1-yard touchdown. And then James Cook also played 0 third down snaps. It was all Latavius Murray and Damian Harris last week, and Latavius Murray out-routed James Cook 13-9. So Cook has had some pretty decent receiving numbers this year, but for some reason they're using Latavius Murray in long down and distance. So I think if Cook is going to be the team leader in carries, and he's going to be efficient, which is good, but he's been a low-end PPR RB1 so far, and I think it's pretty hard for that to continue if Latavius is getting both goal line snaps and passing down snaps.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point for people who are only looking at box scores or not seeing this stuff at all. I think the way that James Cook gets there is just the way you saw against Miami, where this offense is so awesome. They score so many points, get so many yards, that James Cook is in the mix. But yeah, credit to Joe B, by the way, Joe Biscaglia, who covers the Bills for The Athletic. He was talking up Latavius Murray so much in the preseason, and I was like, I love Joe B. He's probably right, but this guy is 34 years old, Latavius. I mean, are we really? And it's true. Latavius is out here playing a ton and having a big role for the Bills. Mark, go ahead with your first move to make.
I'm going with sell Adam Thielen. And this is kind of a player I've been off of heading into the season, so maybe take it with a bit of a grain of salt there. But, I mean, right now Adam Thielen is wide receiver 1 in PPR formats, and I just don't think that's going to sustain. Again, he's 33 years old. We have seen a role change with him going into the slot more for Carolina, but there's also been, some pretty legit, I think, rumors and talking that the Panthers want to trade for a wide receiver 1 this season. And so, like, if that happened, Thielen's stock would dive, pretty quickly, I think, just with not that much volume to go around on this team. And this is just a situation where I think he's valued probably a little too highly based on his last few games. They've been great, no doubt, but I just kind of want to continue to bet against a 33-year-old wide receiver with a rookie quarterback who's getting there, on volume alone when there's some potential injury and volume concerns coming to a head here soon. So I'd be selling Adam Thielen right now.
All right, sell on the aging one, Adam Thielen. My second move to make is going to be buy Rashee Rice. We have seen Rashee Rice's route participation start to grow. And it grew a lot in that blowout in week 3. In week 4, though, in a very close game, he ran around on about half of the dropbacks. Now, I don't think anyone on the Chiefs this season is going to end up running, 90, 100% of the routes. But from what I've seen, and I'm certainly no tape bro, Rashee Rice strikes me as the best option they have right now at the wide receiver position. Rashee Rice is the only Chiefs wide receiver we have in the top 150. And I mean, I think his role is going to continue to grow. I mean, I really do. And so at 135 overall, which is where we have Rashee Rice, he should not be expensive to get. He's probably on waivers in some leagues out there. I'd be trying to add him and put him on my bench at a minimum. Want to have Rashee Rice on the squad. Jack, go ahead with your second move to make.
Yeah, I'm going to go with one of the guys we talked about earlier, and I'm going to say buy Dallas Goedert. We have him decently high in the top 150, but I don't think that your average fantasy player would have him. We had a question earlier about if you should drop Dallas Goedert completely. So I think that he's pretty dirt cheap in a lot of leagues right now. and I'd be looking to acquire him. It's kind of the same thesis as the Jaylen Waddle earlier. We have a lot of evidence of Dallas Goedert being pretty involved in the Philadelphia passing game. It does flow through those top three of AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Goddard so much. I just cannot imagine that Goddard stays so uninvolved for the entire season. He has that contingent upside, like we talked about, if something happens to AJ Brown or Devontae. And the Sirianni's been talking up getting Dallas Goedert involved. There's been a couple instances in the past where AJ Brown has been unhappy about his lack of targets, and they just immediately force feed him the ball. So I think the squeaky wheel narrative is actually somewhat meaningful for Dallas Goedert, and I think that he's going to be more involved moving forward. So I think now is a pretty good time to get a mid to low end, probably a mid-range tight end one, hopefully the rest of the season for almost free.
All right. Bye, Dallas Goedert. Mark, your final move to make.
This one, I went on a little bit of that rant against the Bengals earlier, and I'm going to kind of dig in here a little bit. And I think you should be selling low on T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, Joe Burrow. Jamar Chase is really the only Bengals player I feel confident about starting in fantasy. And at this point, Mixon, Burrow, and Higgins have been such failures that your team is probably in rough shape. I don't think it's going to get that much better, at least in the next couple of weeks. And then they have a bye in week 7 and play San Francisco in week 8. So if you're 1-3 right now and desperate to try and turn it around, I don't think selling low on the Bengals is that bad of an idea. And then again, if you're playing kind of go the other way here, if you're playing from ahead and 3-1, 4-0, and teams are panicking, I do think like T. Higgins is an interesting buy now and just stash, and hopefully like towards the end of the season it pans out. But overall, I'd be selling low on the Bengals if you have a bad record and need to turn things around, because I don't think they're going to be valuable fantasy assets, at least for the next few weeks.
All right. Mark is bailing on the Cincinnati Bengals. That is going to do it for the Week 5 rest of season Top 150 show. Appreciate you all being here. We'll be back tomorrow. Here, I'm going to talk to Ryan Reynolds about the awards markets, one of my favorite betting markets in the NFL side. Be sure to stay tuned for that. For Mark, for Jack, for producer Adam, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.